The house with a locked door in the basement. Joran had always dreamed of owning his own house. After years of renting noisy apartments in the city, he wanted peace and quiet. So when he saw an old farmhouse for sale in the countryside, very cheap, he couldn't believe his luck. The house stood alone, far from other homes. It had tall grass, broken windows, and vines climbing its walls. But Joran saw something special in it, a place where he could finally rest. He met the seller, an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. The man handed him the keys with a strange warning. "Never open the basement door alone," he said in a whisper. Joran laughed awkwardly. "Why not?" The old man looked at him seriously. "Some doors should stay shut." Then he walked away without another word. The first few days, Joran explored every room. The kitchen was dusty. The stairs creaked. The attic was full of cobwebs. But everything felt normal, except for the basement. There was one door in the kitchen that was tightly locked with chains. Joran found it strange. Why lock a basement like that? At night, he began to hear noises, a soft humming, like someone singing far away. Sometimes, he heard something like breathing, slow and heavy, coming from the floor. One night, he placed his ear against the basement door. The humming stopped. But then, he heard a soft voice. "Joran." He jumped back. What the hell? No one else was in the house. He searched the kitchen, living room, and even outside. But no one was there. On the 5th day, curiosity took over. Joran decided to open the door. He found a rusted key hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace. It looked ancient, with strange symbols carved into it. He didn't know how he knew, but something told him. This is the key to the basement. His hand shook as he unlocked the chains. The metal clanked loudly, echoing through the empty house. The door creaked open. A staircase led down into darkness. Cold air rushed up to his face. He took a flashlight and carefully walked down, step by step. The basement was large. Walls were made of stone, wet and cracked. Strange markings glowed faintly on the floor. In the center was something covered with a sheet. He pulled the sheet off slowly. Under it was a pod, round, metallic, glowing with blue light. It looked like something from a spaceship. Suddenly, the pod hissed and opened. Smoke came out. Joran stepped back, heart racing. From the pod, a figure rose. A woman. She was tall, with glowing silver skin and long black hair that moved like smoke. Her eyes opened slowly, bright, blue, and glowing. She looked at Joran and smiled. "You returned for me," she said in a soft voice. "My husband." Joran froze. "Wait. What?" She stepped forward and touched his face gently, like she had known him forever. "You don't remember me yet," she whispered, "but you will." Joran backed away, confused and scared. "Who are you? What are you doing here? Why do you think I'm your husband?" She tilted her head and blinked slowly. "Because we were bonded long ago, before you were born into this body." "What? That's crazy." She smiled again. "You found me, just like you promised. And now, the others will come too." "The others?" he repeated. "What others?" She looked up toward the ceiling. And then they both heard it, a low humming sound, not from the basement this time, but from the sky above. "She knows my name, my past, and my dreams." Joran couldn't move. He stood frozen in the cold basement, staring at the alien woman in front of him. Her silver skin shimmered like water under moonlight. Her eyes, glowing softly, never looked away from his face. "I am Velari," she said again, her voice calm, almost musical. "Your bonded mate. You came back for me." Joran took a step back. "No, I didn't come for anyone. I just bought this house." Velari looked around the dark basement as if waking from a long sleep. "This place, it feels different. The stars have shifted. How long has it been?" Joran shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about. You were in some kind of pod. It looked like a machine, like a spaceship. She walked closer to him. Her feet didn't make a sound on the stone floor. I was placed in stasis, put to sleep for safety, waiting for the signal. You were the signal, Joran. How do you know my name? Valerie gave a soft smile. Because I've said it 1,000 times, even while sleeping. Because I've seen you every night in my dreams. Joran's mind was spinning. He ran up the stairs, heart pounding. Valerie didn't chase him. She just stood there, watching him leave, as if she expected it. Upstairs, Joran slammed the basement door shut and locked it again. He leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. Was he dreaming? Was this some kind of prank? But deep down, a strange feeling tugged at his chest, like he knew her, like her voice had whispered to him before. Maybe in dreams he didn't remember. That night, he couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Every little noise made him jump. Around midnight, he heard footsteps downstairs. Not heavy ones, soft, gentle, like someone gliding barefoot across the floor. He grabbed a lamp and crept out of bed. His hands trembled. In the kitchen, he stopped. Valerie was there, sitting at the table, drinking water. She looked up calm. I was thirsty. Joran stepped back. How did you get out? The locks are old, and I do not need doors. He watched as she lifted the glass again. Her fingers were long and delicate, but her movements were steady, strong. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Valerie placed the glass down and stood. Then send me away. Joran opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She walked closer, holding something, a small crystal pendant. This was yours, long ago. You wore it the day we were joined. She handed it to him. The crystal was cool, glowing faintly blue. As soon as his fingers touched it, a flash. He gasped. Suddenly, he was somewhere else, in another world. A tall sky with 2 suns, a great hall filled with stars. And there he was, kneeling before Valerie, placing the same crystal around her neck. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. Joran dropped the crystal. What? What did you do to me? I did nothing, Valerie said softly. Your memory is returning. Slowly. No, that can't be real. That wasn't me. That was someone else. She looked at him with a kind of sadness. You were not born on my world. You were created for another purpose. But your soul is the same. I know it. Joran backed away, heart racing. This is insane. The next morning, he tried to call someone, anyone, but the phone didn't work. No signal, no internet, not even a radio station came through. It was like the house had been cut off. He drove into town, but every time he left the main road, something went wrong. The GPS glitched. Roads looped back. He passed the same tree 3 times. It was like he couldn't leave. Valerie was waiting on the porch when he returned. You're not trapped, she said, but the house is now protected. The others are watching. What others? She pointed to the sky. High above, clouds spun slowly around a single dark spot, something hovering there, invisible to human eyes, but clearly not natural. They know I awakened, and they know you're with me. That night, Joran locked every door, every window. He tried to block out everything. But at 3 a.m., his room filled with light. He opened his eyes, and Valerie stood at the foot of his bed, glowing. I had to come, she said. Please, Joran whispered, just tell me the truth. Valerie sat on the floor beside him, quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. There are many galaxies. My people live far beyond the reach of your sun. We are peaceful, but not all others are. I was chosen to protect the last star map, a code that can lead to great power. I was supposed to hide it on Earth, but I was not supposed to fall in love with a human. Joran blinked. You fell in love with me? Valerie nodded. They found us. They attacked, and I had to hide. But before I went to sleep, I gave part of the map to you, in your blood. Joran stared at her in silence. Suddenly, from outside the house, a loud boom shook the ground. Valerie stood quickly. Her glow brightened. They found us again. Joran ran to the window. In the sky, something huge hovered. Then came the voice, deep, alien, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Return the Starbearer. Return the Bonded One, or face total extinction. Attack from the sky and secrets from the earth. The ground shook as Joran stood frozen by the window. A strange sound buzzed in the sky above the house, like metal grinding against metal, mixed with a deep, humming vibration that made his chest feel heavy. Valerie stood behind him, her silver eyes glowing brighter than ever. It's them. The Travaxians. I hoped we'd have more time. Joran turned to her. Who are they? They are not a race. They are a machine-made species. They don't live. They consume. They feed on planets, knowledge, stars, and they want what's inside you. He backed away. Inside me. Valerie nodded. The star map. The one I hid in your blood. Your DNA carries the key to an ancient system, one that could restart galaxies, or destroy them. Before Joran could ask more, the house was blasted with a blinding white light from above. Windows shattered. Dust filled the air. The front door flew open by itself. Outside, 3 metallic drones hovered in the yard. Each one had 6 glowing red eyes and floating arms with sharp tools, spinning slowly, scanning, reaching. Joran grabbed Valerie's hand. We need to run. No, she whispered. We stand. I protect you. She stepped outside barefoot, her long hair flowing like ink in the wind. She raised one hand. The drones fired. 3 bright beams shot at her, but a glowing shield of blue light erupted from her body. The beams stopped inches from her skin, bending around her like rain hitting glass. With a flick of her wrist, she sent a pulse of energy forward. The first drone exploded, dropping in a burst of fire and smoke. Joran watched from the door, stunned. How are you doing this? Valerie's voice was calm. Because I've done it before. And I will do it again. For you. The other 2 drones backed away. Then, a mechanical voice filled the sky again. The bonded protector has awakened. Initiate ground breach. Bring the mail. Suddenly, the earth beneath Joran's feet began to rumble. The grass in the front yard split open. Metal claws rose from underground, like a buried spider waking from sleep. Valerie turned around. Inside. Now. They rushed back into the basement. The pod Valerie had come from began glowing again, this time brighter than before. There is something you must see, she said, leading him to the far corner of the basement. The wall was made of rough stone, but she placed her palm flat against it. A soft vibration passed through the air. The wall shimmered and disappeared, revealing the hidden tunnel. What is this? Joran asked. Valerie walked ahead, guiding him into the dark. This house is old, she said, but not just human old. It was built here for a reason. Below this home is an ancient chamber. My people built it long ago. As they walked, strange symbols began to glow along the tunnel walls. Alien letters, swirling patterns, and star maps. I hid here not just to sleep, she continued, but to guard the chamber, to wait for you. Why me? I'm nobody, Joran muttered. You were chosen, not for who you are, but who you will become. They reached the end of the tunnel, an open space with a high ceiling made of crystal and metal. A round platform floated in the center, with a pulsing blue light above it. Joran stepped closer. On the platform were holograms, floating images of planets, stars, galaxies, and at the center of it all was a symbol, shaped exactly like the mark that had appeared on his skin days earlier. Valerie touched the image. Your blood unlocks this map. You hold the last known coordinates to the source flame. The what? Joran asked. She looked at him, serious now. A star that burns with pure creation. The heart of the first galaxy. Whoever controls it, controls the future. Joran's legs felt weak. He sat down on the cold metal floor. All I wanted was a quiet house, he whispered. Valeri knelt beside him. And all I wanted was for you to remember me. Suddenly, the ground shook again. Louder, closer. The wall behind them cracked. Dirt and metal fell. One of the Trigaxian claws broke through the tunnel wall. They've breached the underground. Valeri shouted. We must leave. Now. She placed a hand over Joran's chest, and for a second, he glowed. What did you just do? I unlocked part of you, she said quickly, enough to survive what's coming. They ran back toward the pod room. The basement was filled with dust and pieces of ceiling. A massive drone now floated inside the kitchen. It looked more like a monster than a machine. Giant, black, with red symbols burning on its body. It turned toward Joran and spoke in a voice that chilled his bones. The carrier of the code, the unformed god. You will come with us now. Valeri stood in front of him, hands glowing, but her body swayed. She was growing weaker. Joran grabbed a metal pipe from the floor. His heart beat wildly. Maybe he wasn't a hero. Maybe he wasn't a warrior. But he wouldn't let anyone take her, not again. He stepped forward beside Valeri. I don't know who you are, he said to the drone, but I'm not going with you. The drone raised its arm. Joran swung the pipe. It hit the metal, but instead of breaking, it glowed blue. The drone was sent flying across the room, crashing into the far wall. Joran stared at the pipe in shock. Valeri smiled, even as she collapsed into his arms. You're awakening, she whispered, just in time. The bond they never chose, but can't escape. Joran sat on the cold basement floor, holding Valeri in his arms. Her body was glowing faintly, but her breath had grown shallow. Her silver skin had dimmed, and her voice was barely a whisper. You used too much energy, Joran said. You shouldn't have fought them alone. Valeri's glowing eyes slowly opened. I had to protect you. That is what I was made to do. No, Joran said firmly. You're not just a protector. You're... He stopped himself. The words were stuck in his throat. She gave a weak smile. Say it. I don't know, he said quietly. Everything is moving so fast. You say we were bonded, that I saved you in another life, that I'm carrying some map in my blood, but none of that feels real. None of that is me. Valeri placed a hand over his chest. Then let me show you. Suddenly, everything changed. Joran was no longer in the basement. He was standing under a sky with two suns. The air was warm, golden, and the stars above were brighter than he had ever seen before. Before him was a tall temple made of crystal, floating in the sky. Valeri stood beside him, but different. She wore a long robe, her hair braided with glowing vines. She smiled at him. You came, her past self said, even when your people warned you not to. Joran's vision self spoke back. I would cross galaxies for you, Valeri. They stood before a great flame, a floating orb of fire and light. Their hands touched it together. As they did, glowing lines formed between them, connecting their hearts. The voice of a high priest echoed, by star and soul, this bond is eternal. Until light fades, you are one. Then the memory vanished. Joran gasped, back in the present. His hands trembled. Valeri sat up, watching him closely. You saw it, didn't you? She asked softly. He nodded. We were married, in another life. Not by choice, she said. Our worlds forced it. It was a peace bond between two enemies. They thought it was just a political act. But the bond became real. Joran stood slowly. So all of this, the star map, the connection between us, it wasn't just science. It was love. Valerie looked down. I didn't expect it to be, but yes. And now, the universe is forcing it again. The sound of machinery echoed from above. The house creaked. The attackers were still outside, searching. Valerie stood weakly and leaned against the wall. They won't stop. Not until they tear the knowledge from your mind, or your bones. Then what do we do? Joran asked. We awaken the rest of your power, she said. They returned to the hidden tunnel beneath the house, the one Valerie had opened before. This time, they went deeper. The walls became older. The air grew colder. After a long walk, they reached a sealed door made of stone and silver. This is the Echo Vault, Valerie said. It holds memories of our first lives. If you truly want to understand who you are, you must enter alone. Joran stepped forward. Will it hurt? He asked. Valerie looked at him. Only if the truth does. The door opened by itself. Joran stepped inside. Instantly, the world vanished around him again. He saw flashes, war, spaceships burning in the sky, a younger version of Valerie standing on a battlefield, holding a staff. She was crying. Then he saw himself, older, stronger, in alien armor, standing between her and a group of enemies. He shouted, If you want her, you'll have to go through me. They attacked. He fought them, wounded, bleeding, but he did not fall. He kept her safe. The vision faded. When he came out of the vault, his skin was marked with glowing lines, similar to Valerie's. They pulsed gently with blue light. Valerie looked at him with awe. You're awakening. I still don't remember everything, Joran said. But I know this, I'm not letting them take you again. Valerie's eyes softened. Then we must finish what we started centuries ago. She took his hand and pressed it against the wall of the vault. A deep rumble shook the tunnel. The floor shifted, and a platform rose. On it sat a round device, glowing like the sun. This is the seed of the flame, she whispered. The core piece of the source map. As Joran touched it, it melted into his hand, becoming part of his body, absorbed by the light inside him. Valerie stepped back in shock. You're merging with it. That's not supposed to happen. Suddenly, the entire cave shook violently. From above, a giant red eye appeared, projected onto the stone. He has taken the seed. Initiate World Cleansing Protocol. Joran and Valerie ran as the cave collapsed behind them. Dust, stone, and glowing sparks fell around them as the tunnel cracked apart. They made it back to the basement, breathing heavily. What's the World Cleansing Protocol? Joran asked. Valerie's face turned pale. It means they're going to wipe Earth clean to find you. They'll burn everything. Joran clenched his fists. Then it's time we stopped running. He looked at the glowing lines on his skin. Tell me how to fight. Captured by aliens who say, you stole our queen. Joran stood in the middle of the basement, his chest rising and falling fast. The glowing lines across his arms pulsed like tiny rivers of blue light. Valerie stared at him, speechless. You weren't supposed to merge with the seed, she whispered. It was only meant to guide you, not become part of you. I didn't mean to, Joran said, breathing hard. It just happened. Valerie's expression was strange, part awe, part fear. That means you're something more, something ancient. Even I don't understand what you're becoming now. Before either of them could say more, a loud, humming vibration filled the air. The entire house shook. Lights flickered. Plates fell from shelves. Valerie's eyes widened. They're here. Outside, the skies had turned blood red. A giant black vessel floated above the clouds. It wasn't like the drones. This was alive, covered in long tendrils of metal, glowing veins, and rows of red eyes. It looked like a sea creature from a nightmare. Suddenly, a beam of light shot from the ship, straight down on the house. Everything froze. Joran opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. He couldn't move. Valeri floated beside him, her body also frozen in the beam. Then everything went black. Joran woke up in a cold chamber. Metal walls, blue lights, no windows. His arms were chained to a floating chair, his legs too. Strange machines clicked around him. A thick fog hissed from vents above. Across the room, Valeri was also chained, held inside a glowing sphere. She looked unconscious. Before he could call to her, 3 beings entered the room. They were tall, covered in armor that shifted like liquid metal. Their faces were hidden behind smooth masks, each one glowing with a different symbol. The one in the center stepped forward. "So," the voice said, echoing from all directions, "you are the thief who stole our queen." Joran blinked. "Queen? What queen?" The alien touched a floating panel. A hologram appeared. It showed Valeri standing proudly on a throne of stars. Her robe shimmered with royal crests. "This female," the alien said coldly, "was promised to the Trivaxian line. Her union with you was forbidden. It cost us control of the seed. You must be erased." "I didn't choose any of this," Joran shouted. "I didn't even know who she was until a few days ago." The alien's mask tilted. "But your soul did. The bond was ancient. You defied the laws of galaxies. And now, Earth will burn because of it." Suddenly, a new figure entered the room. Smaller, hooded, silent. The armored aliens bowed to this newcomer. He removed his hood, and Joran gasped. He looked human. At least, mostly. His skin was pale, almost silver. His eyes glowed red. His voice was smooth like oil. "I am Commander Veth, and I know who you really are, Joran." Joran struggled in the chair. "Then tell me." Veth stepped closer. "You are not just a protector or a human carrying a map. You are the last starborn." Joran frowned. "What does that mean?" Veth walked slowly around him. "Long before Valeri's people, long before Trivaxians, there was a race that could create light, bend matter, and awaken stars. They were the first life, the starborn. All of them were destroyed." He stopped beside Joran. "Except one." Joran's heart pounded. "You're saying, I'm not human. You were placed on Earth, hidden in flesh. Your body is human, yes, but your core is starborn. That is why the seed chose you." Veth leaned in. "And that is why we cannot allow you to remain alive." Before Joran could speak, the machines around him powered up. A painful pulse hit his chest, like a lightning strike through his bones. He screamed. Inside her prison, Valeri's eyes opened. She saw Joran in pain, and something snapped. The chains around her began to melt. Her body lit up with a brilliant white glow. "Let him go," she shouted. The aliens turned, surprised. Before they could react, Valeri exploded into motion. Her sphere shattered. Waves of raw energy blasted through the room. The armored aliens were thrown into the walls like broken puppets. Commander Veth raised his arm, but Valeri was already in front of him. "You cannot hurt him," she said, her voice echoing like thunder. "He is mine." She touched Joran's chest. The chains melted. He fell into her arms, gasping for breath. "Valeri," he whispered. She smiled. "I told you. I would protect you." Alarms blared. The ship shook. "Quick," she said, "before they recover." She helped Joran up. Together, they ran down a hallway filled with red lights and flashing symbols. "Where are we going?" Joran asked. "To the core," Valeri said. "If we can disable the ship's center, we can escape." They reached a wide chamber. At the center was a giant orb of dark energy, pulsing like a heart. Valeri raised her hand. "Help me channel it. The starborn power is inside you now. I can guide it." Joran reached out his hand. Light flowed from him, strong, golden, and ancient. Valeri's body sensed with his. Together, they focused the beam at the dark core. The orb began to crack. The ship screamed, a sound of metal and pain. Suddenly, everything exploded into light. Joran woke up, back in the farmhouse. He was lying on the floor, covered in dust and scratches. Valeri was beside him, also waking up. "The ship?" he asked. Valeri nodded slowly. "We destroyed the core. We escaped just in time." Joran sat up, breathing hard. "I'm not human," he whispered. "I'm something else." Valeri touched his face gently. "You're still you, just more than you knew." Joran looked out the window. The sky was blue again. But deep in the woods, a new shadow moved. They were safe, for now. But the galaxy had only just begun to remember them. Escape, betrayal, and a final decision. The sun had just risen over the hills near the farmhouse. The sky was calm, birds chirped, and the grass swayed softly in the breeze. But Joran couldn't enjoy it. Not after everything that had happened. He stood on the porch, his arms crossed, staring at the road beyond the trees. He still felt the glow in his blood, the star-born energy, like a second heartbeat inside him. It frightened him more than he wanted to admit. Behind him, Valeri stepped out quietly. "You haven't slept," she said. "Hard to sleep," he replied, "when every shadow might be another alien trying to tear my brain out." She walked up beside him and looked at the sky. "They won't stop coming. Not after what we did to the Trivaxian ship." Joran turned to her. "So, what's next? We just hide forever?" Valeri didn't answer. Instead, she handed him a small glowing crystal. It pulsed gently in his palm. "What's this?" "It's a beacon," she said softly. "From my world." He looked at her, confused. "It means they found me." Later that day, 3 ships arrived, smooth, silver, and silent. They hovered just above the trees and lowered a bridge of light to the farmhouse. Valeri looked at Joran with sad eyes. "They're not here to fight. They're here to take me home. I was royalty, remember? My people thought I was dead. Now that they know I'm alive, they want me back." Joran's heart dropped. "You're leaving." She hesitated. "They said if I come peacefully, they'll leave Earth alone. They won't harm you, or the planet." He stepped back. "So you're just giving yourself up?" "I'm saving you." "No," he said. "No, you don't get to decide that for me." Valeri placed a hand on his chest. "I don't want to go, but if I stay, they'll bring more here. I won't let that happen." Joran watched her rise into the air, carried by the beam of light. The ships vanished into the sky, leaving behind silence. He returned to the empty house, heart hollow. 1 week later, the dreams started again. Only now, they weren't just dreams. He saw flashes of Valeri, trapped in a golden cage, surrounded by guards. Her voice echoed in his mind. "Joran, I'm sorry." Then the vision changed. A tall throne room, made of crystal and starlight. Valeri stood at the end, dressed in ceremonial armor. A crown rested in her hands. An alien male stood beside her. Tall, handsome, cold. The royal wedding. Joran woke up with a jolt. His hands were glowing again. He couldn't take it anymore. "If she thinks I'm just going to sit here while she sacrifices herself for me," he growled, "she doesn't know me at all." Valeri's homeworld. The day of the ceremony. The capital city was floating in the sky, surrounded by rings of golden clouds. Giant statues lined the star bridge leading into the palace. Inside, Valeri stood in silence before a room full of alien nobles. Her dress was woven from light. Her expression was blank. The prince beside her leaned close. "You've done your duty. Once this bond is complete, your planet will be safe, and your little human pet will be forgotten." She flinched but said nothing. Then suddenly, the sky exploded. One of the temple windows shattered. The guards rushed forward. A glowing figure landed in the center of the throne room, dressed in armor made of earth metal, shaped by ancient power. It was Joran, and he was furious. "Get away from her," he shouted. The prince raised a staff. "You don't belong here, Starborn." Joran raised his hand, and lightning answered. A golden blast hit the staff, shattering it into dust. The entire room froze. Valeri stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "You came. I told you," he said. "I'm not letting anyone take you from me again." The prince tried to attack, but Valeri moved first. With one swift motion, she summoned her energy blade and pressed it to the prince's chest. "This marriage is over." The elders protested, but Joran held up the starborn crystal embedded in his chest. "You want peace," he said. "Then let her go. Let us go." The room went silent. Finally, the High Elder stepped down. The bond between them was ancient, stronger than politics, stronger than war. Let the past be honored. That night, Joran and Valeri stood beneath the twin moons of her homeworld. For the first time, there was no war, no fear, only silence. "I thought I was saving you," Valeri whispered. "And I thought I lost you," Joran replied. "But maybe we're just better together." She leaned against him, her silver skin glowing in the starlight. "You still want peace?" he asked. She nodded. "Then let's go make it, together." The house that became a home across the stars. The stars blinked quietly above Earth as Joran and Valeri stepped out of the beam of light that had brought them back home. They stood once again in front of the old farmhouse, the place where it had all begun. The broken porch creaked under their feet. The windows still held the dust of battles past. But to Joran, it looked different now. It looked like home. Valeri breathed in deeply, her silver skin glowing softly in the moonlight. "Earth air. It's warm and simple. I missed this." Joran chuckled. "We've only been gone a few days." "Days for you," she said, smiling. "For me, lifetimes pass between heartbeats when I'm not near you." They walked hand in hand into the house. The inside was quiet. The basement door still stood at the back of the kitchen. But this time, it was open. Not dark, not dangerous, just quiet. Over the next few weeks, they rebuilt the home. Valeri used her energy to repair the foundation. Joran handled the painting and woodwork. Together, they planted glowing flowers from Valeri's homeworld in the backyard. Flowers that never wilted, even at night. In the evenings, they cooked together. Valeri liked learning Earth recipes, though she often added strange alien spices that made the food glow and occasionally float. And when the stars came out, they sat on the roof, wrapped in blankets, watching the sky for danger or for beauty. For the first time, the galaxy felt still. But peace does not mean the end of the story. One evening, Valeri stood in the hallway, touching her stomach with a puzzled expression. Joran noticed. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I think something's changing." He stepped forward, concern on his face. "What do you mean?" She took his hand and placed it gently over her belly. "It's a soft light," she whispered. "Small, but growing. Like a star being born." Joran froze. "You mean?" Valeri smiled gently. "Yes." They weren't just bonded by ancient magic anymore. They were starting a family. As weeks passed, strange things began to happen. Valeri's powers became stronger, and so did Joran's. He could lift objects without touching them. He could sense animals nearby. He even stopped a thunderstorm just by raising his hand once. "I think the starborn energy is evolving," Valeri said. "It's preparing you for what's next." "What's next?" he asked. Before she could answer, something strange happened in the basement. The glowing crystal chamber, the one where Valeri had awakened, began to hum again. The pod she once slept in shimmered and shifted. Joran grabbed a light and went downstairs. Valeri followed closely. As they entered, the walls of the basement suddenly lit up with hundreds of floating symbols. Then, from the center of the room, a new pod rose from the floor. But this one was different. Smaller, rounder, and already open. Inside it lay a small infant, human-like, but glowing, sleeping peacefully. Valeri gasped. This is a message." Joran looked at her, confused. "What kind of message leaves a baby in your basement?" Valeri slowly reached into the pod and lifted the child. The baby didn't cry. It opened its eyes, glowing faint gold, and smiled. Then, from the walls, a voice spoke in a language they didn't know. Valeri touched the wall, and the voice translated into Earth English. "To the last starborn and his bonded queen, this child is not yours by blood, but by fate. A child of two dying stars. She holds the future of peace and of power. Raise her well." Joran stared in shock. "They sent us a baby." Valeri smiled softly, tears in her eyes. "No, they sent us a hope." From that day forward, the farmhouse was no longer just a home. It became something else, a beacon, a sanctuary, a place where one starborn, one alien queen, and one mysterious child could grow together as a family. They named the child Leora, meaning light reborn in Valeri's language. Every night, Joran sat with her in his arms, watching the sky. He knew threats would come again. That one day, someone would knock on their door asking questions. But for now, the stars above were silent. And the house, once dark, old, and forgotten, was filled with light, laughter, and love.